Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to another live edition of the WGSN-DB Going Solo Veterans Corner. And of course, I'm your host, retired Army First Sergeant Paul Holbert, and it's great to be back with you live this evening. For those of you that watch the show, we really appreciate you continuing to join us. And in fact, it's thanks to our audience that the Going Solo Veterans Corner was listed among the top 25 podcasts to watch in Fairfax County. So we really appreciate that, and we appreciate you continuing to join us. Before we get into tonight's guest, I just want to take a moment again to talk about sponsors to the show. We really appreciate these folks, and they have been great with us. So first, of course, Quest Jewelers from Merrifield, Virginia. Quest Jewelers, folks, I can't tell you enough. You need to check them out. There's their website, questjewelers.com. There's their number. They are excellent at not only formulating custom pieces for you that you want for whatever the special occasion may be, or just something from the showcase. They have it all. So I encourage you to take a look and see what they have and give them a call. I also want to thank Nationwide IT Services. NIS is a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business owned and operated by retired Army Warrant Officer C.K. Park. C.K. and his crew are located in Fairfax, Virginia. However, they have employees in offices all over the United States doing work for various organizations, including the United States government. So give them a call if your business is in need of assistance with whether it's IT, security, training, professional development, performance management, whatever you're looking for. CK has the folks who can help you do it. So give them a call. They're outstanding. All right. So I want to get into tonight's show, and we're going to talk a little bit here in just a moment about Second Lieutenant Antoinette, as they call her, Toni Amato. And of course, here with us tonight as our guest is her daughter, GraceAnn Dotolo. And GraceAnn is coming to us, of course, live from Florida. So the wonders of the modern internet continue. And GraceAnn, I really appreciate you joining us this evening. And if you would, just take a couple minutes to share with our audience a little bit about yourself before we start sharing your mother's story.
Sure. Well, Paul, it's a pleasure to meet you, and thank you for giving me this opportunity. It's really... My mother has been my mentor and my hero, and it's really wonderful that I get to share her story and help her legacy live on. So welcome, everyone. My name is GraceAnn Dotolo, and I live in Tampa, Florida, as Paul was saying, and I work for an IT company. I am a senior product manager and supervisor for TD SYNNEX Corporation. I have two children, a son, Jonathan, a daughter, Antonia, and a puppy named Cupcake. Well, not a puppy. She's 15. So no more puppy, but she's tiny.
No more puppy. So let me guess, is she a tiny little thing, or is she a big one?
She was supposed to be tiny, but she's 13 pounds. So
okay, well, that's still pretty small, yeah. So you can call her Cupcake, I think. Well, you know, it's good to see you tonight, GraceAnn. And I actually was going to say it in going over some of the information about you, that you sent me about your mother, and that was one of the things I noticed was you seem to have such a great admiration for your mom, and consider her to be a role model for you in every sense that you could imagine. And I noticed behind you, that's her uniform, isn't it, that you have hanging back there?
That is her Army jacket, and her hat or cap. It's in the pocket. And I have her skirt that matches. And I was going to wear that jacket tonight, but unfortunately, it didn't fit. My mom was a lot smaller than I am. So I hung it up.
Well, you know, that, to be honest with you, all these years later, a lot of us are like that. I mean, when I retired from the Army, my dress uniform right now would no longer fit me because I've kind of outgrown it. I will say, and Cece can tell you too, that we had a wonderful guest on a couple of years ago. In fact, she just did a rebroadcast of our World War II veteran here from Manassas, Virginia, Pete Anastasi, who was about 100 years old when he appeared on our show. And he was actually wearing the same brown khaki shirt that he came home in all those years ago. So, yeah, we don't find that too often.
Yeah.
So not surprising that, but then again, that wasn't your uniform, that was your mom's, and I just thought that we would point that out, that you kept her uniform. Yeah. So as we talk about your mother, and like I said, I was impressed with the fact that the admiration that you do give her and the credit you give her in your life, and the role model you said that she was in every way. And that's coming from a child. I can tell you, and I'll just share with you briefly. I got a Father's Day card from one of my boys, and it, big old guy like me, retired military, almost brought me to tears, because the card said inside, one of the greatest compliments anyone could ever pay me is that I'm like my father. And, so when you get that kind of, how can you say, compliment or respect from your kids, I mean, I can tell you firsthand, it really makes you feel good. So I'm sure that your mom, she's probably looking and feeling blessed to know how you feel about her. So I just kind of wanted to point that out. I thought that was really something, the way you introduced her and that information to me. And it kind of struck me as well. But I thought what was interesting about your mother was she kind of came up with the typical, how can you say, the American story from back in the early 1900s. Because you said she was born in 1920 and in New York. And her parents owned the butcher shop, and she was one of 13 kids. That's
correct.
Yeah, tell us a little bit more about her childhood and her family,
So I believe there were 7 boys. The rest were girls. My mom was number 3 in line. Oh. So one of the oldest. So that's why she always helped out in the store and helped out in the home and with the children. A cute story. Because she always had to take care of the children, she always said she wasn't having any children. Well, I'm number 7. So
oh my gosh.
She ended up having 7 children after all. Wow. So yeah, I love that story. That's a cute little ditty about her. That's it. They grew up in the country, pretty much, the suburbs of Long Island in New York. And when they were a little older, they moved to a farm in another town on Long Island and did a lot of horseback riding. Every evening, a group, about 10 of them, would go horseback riding. Siblings and friends, they'd get together and they'd go trail riding every night. So great upbringing.
Yeah, I can just imagine. My grandparents had a farm in upstate New York when I was young, and we did the same thing, young, working on the farm, did some horseback riding, chasing sheep and goats through pens and, all kinds of stuff when I was a kid. So yeah, I can identify with that. And I remember that was kind of a fun life. So I can imagine, thinking about that for your mom, growing up in that type of atmosphere. And that's why I said she comes from kind of like the all-American story, a family owning their own butcher shop in their own place, and having a large family, taking care of your brothers and sisters, and kind of like the typical thing you would see in one of the movies on TV from that era. So what's the old expression? Maybe a little Pollyannish, but very accurate, right?
Yes.
So your mom ended up, after high school, she went to what, Pilgrim State Nursing School in New York and got her nursing degree in what, 1945, wasn't it?
Not sure. Close, if not 1945.
Okay. So
Yeah.
there was a unique story about her and one of her friends, how they were going to go work on their graduate degree in nursing, and then things got turned around, and next thing you know, she ended up in the Army Nurses Corps through the American Red Cross. Share that with us and tell us, what prompted your mom to do that?
Sure. So she and her friend Edith decided to go visit. I guess, I don't know if they had an interview or an appointment with the director of nursing at Queens General Hospital. And when they walked into the director of nursing's office and said, we would like jobs, and we'll also be going to school to work on our master's degrees.
Yeah.
Will you hire us? Are you hiring, or whatever? And she said, well, I have a better idea. There are a lot of young soldiers that need good nurses to care for them.
Yeah.
In the Army and in the war. What do you ladies think of that? They marched right out of her office, right to the Red Cross station, and signed up then and there. The next day, they were commissioned, and in Staten Island, and then they were sent to basic training in Atlantic City, New Jersey, where in one short month they were trained to be soldiers.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. I mean, going in from looking at their own future to having someone share with them, a need from soldiers overseas. And I understand this was, 1945, late in the war, but the Pacific War especially was really heated up during the last portions of 1945 with the rest of the island hopping, the Marines. There were a lot of Marines killed and wounded on places like Lady, Guadalcanal, so many places, Okinawa especially, took a toll on the Marine Corps. And so there were a lot of young Marines in need of help and care. So it's amazing to hear how your mom and her friend just decided, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to put my own life on hold for a little while, and I'm going to join. And, that was very common of some of the things that the military still did up until a few years back. They had specialty areas they needed. They would bring those people on in those specialty areas that were trained, send them to some basic military training, and then send them out to do the job. And sometimes that's what it takes to get that done. And that's what it was taking to take care of all those soldiers. So she trained for a month. And then I understand she went to Mason General Army Hospital, and her first assignment was in Long Island in a psychiatric facility.
Yes.
I know that was interesting because I believe she was there taking care of Italian POWs, I think.
Yes.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. So that was actually, I assume they renamed it Mason General U.S. Army Hospital because she had said that they were happy to be back at Pilgrim State Hospital. So I'm assuming it was the same facility in Brentwood, Long Island. So her first assignment was as charge nurse, taking care of these Italian POWs that mainly had mental health issues, a lot of depression. So in total, she worked there for 3 months. Her worst memory there, one of the most disturbed patients on the ward, one night he just snapped and ripped a leg off of a heavy chair and beat down the captain's door, got inside, and then, so they all ran, and they had to subdue him by pushing him against the wall with a mattress. And then they wrestled him and put a straitjacket on him.
Yeah.
So, that was a little bit scary, I'm sure.
Welcome to the Army, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she also, loved all the soldiers that were there. She bonded with them, except for one captain who was very stern and wasn't happy about a woman being on the ward. And my mother was amazing. Nothing got to her. She just did what she had to do, focused, did what she had to do, whether he paid attention to her or not. She still did her job and took care of, him as well as others, but he wouldn't even make eye contact with her, she said.
Yeah. That's well, especially from that time in some cultures, especially, women just were not put in those positions, especially where the position your mom could have later ended up in out in the Pacific as an Army nurse. Because, throughout our military, through World War II history, we have stories of Army nurses that were captured by the Japanese and held in POW camps. And,
Yes.
They faced a lot of adversarial circumstances, much like a lot of our soldiers did. So I gotta ask, Teresa sent us a note here and said that your mom's father was not happy about her joining the Army like that, but when he found out the Red Cross was involved, it made him feel a little bit better.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yes, that is true. He was extremely, both of her parents were extremely old-fashioned, and protective of their children. Yeah.
Well, I mean, especially during that time, you can definitely understand that with the way our cultures were, even at that time with women in general. Of course, we've come a long way in that regard. And, but yeah, I mean, that was dad and mom's prerogative at that time, wasn't it? That we do that and protect those kids, especially the female children that we had, our daughters, all through history. So nothing unusual there. Well, GraceAnn, I tell you what, we're gonna take, may be a minute or two early here, but we're gonna take a quick break because this is a good place to pause. And when we come back, we're gonna continue to talk about the story, about your mom, and we'll talk about how she ended up going overseas. So for those of you in the audience, hold on just a minute, and we'll be right back. All right, welcome back, everyone. And you've been watching the WGSN-DB Going Solo Veterans Corner. And tonight our guest has been GraceAnn Dotolo, and she is sharing the story of her mom. Interesting story. And we're going to get back to it in a minute, but we're going to talk about Second Lieutenant Antoinette Toni Amato. So good information so far, GraceAnn. It looks like we've got a number of people joining them. Lisa and Craig are watching as well. So hopefully these are some of the folks. Oh, there's Kathleen. Yeah. So we got some of your friends and family hopefully joining the show and watching and I just saw one other note too as well that Teresa shared that your mom would often write letters to the family, but that is normal, especially from certain areas. The government would censor them and either cut them up or cut information out of them. So I know, especially for a conflict as large as World War II, that could be really, really frustrating because there was so much going on in so many different areas. And of course, that happened as well, even in modern times when I was deployed to combat areas. You know, they told us what we could or could not write. I'm not sure whether I had any of my letters opened, but you know, we were given strict guidance on what we could or could not mention. So I'm sure it was much, much tighter back then and frustrating for your family. So let's continue on. So your mom finally ended up going overseas. She went to Seattle and she was put on at least a nice converted luxury liner. And was sent to sent to Honolulu or Hawaii first for a while, right?
Yes. They were supposed to go to Okinawa.
Yeah.
But they never made it.
Yeah. So they spent some months in Hawaii first before she headed for the Far East.
Correct.
Yeah. So what was she doing in Hawaii? She was at the 147 General Hospital and was one of the 3 nurses on ward and was caring for 50 to 60 patients.
Yes, exactly. And big turnover. She said it was like a crew of 50 or 60 men would come in during the night. They would, care for them.
Yeah.
Take care of them for the 24 hours. They'd ship them off to the mainland, and another 50 or 60 soldiers came in. So unbelievable.
Yeah, well, I do know that with military triage in hospitals for wounded, those that are able to travel and they get them back to the States as quickly as possible. So if they're in a stopover point in Hawaii and they're only there overnight, at least they were fit enough to continue to travel to go back home for further treatment where they could be with their family. So at least that was a good aspect of it. So she had a hand in watching over those soldiers that had come back wounded that were waiting to be shipped home for more treatment and then whatever else, they needed to have happen to them. Did you ever get a chance to ask her about any of that time, with the wounded soldiers?
Unfortunately, not really.
Yeah.
I don't remember many stories.
Yeah.
I know that the one picture that was posted of her caring for that young man, I believe, was in Honolulu.
Okay. So did she spent about 4 or 5 months there before they finally sent her off. And the interesting thing was, I thought it was interesting how she ended up on the hospital ship Repose headed to Okinawa and then ended up getting hit by a typhoon en route to Okinawa. So what happened there?
Yeah. I loved hearing that story from her.
Yeah.
As horrific as it was a miracle that the ship didn't go down and that they lived. So basically, out of the blue, this typhoon came about. They were eating dinner one night, and the table that they were eating dinner on collapsed. It was so bad, they had to all go back to their rooms. They had to make a human chain just to be able to stand and navigate their way back to their rooms. The head nurse went up to the captain and said, what's the outlook?
Yeah.
What's going to happen? And he said, the wheel is in God's hands. I can't control it. And the priest that was on board actually gave them, the captain said, we're going down, made an announcement. And the priest that was on board gave everybody their last rites. I mean,
Wow.
they were going down as far as everybody knew. And my mom and her roommate they got back to their room, and there was ankle deep water, and the suitcases were floating all over the room. They were so sick that they were fighting or taking turns over the toilet, vomiting one and then the next, and back and forth. And my mom didn't smoke at that time, but apparently she lit up a cigarette and figured, if I'm going down, I'm going down. And she lit up a cigarette, which is crazy.
Well, either that or it could have been to help cover the smell from all the people getting sick too.
Oh yeah.
Quite possibly.
Yeah, can't even imagine. The ship's radar went down. The lifeboats were ripped off and thrown into the sea.
Jeez.
Yeah, so just, by the grace of God.
Yeah, this is interesting because, of course, I had heard of the repose, and I did not realize that this was part of the history of that ship. Because that was a pretty popular ship at the time. And I did not realize that had happened to it. So that was an interesting story.
Oh, wow. Great.
So she made it. She never did make it to Okinawa, which, I think by that time, I think the heavy fighting had pretty much broken on Okinawa, and they were trying to care for wounded Marines and Japanese civilians at that time. Mm-hmm. So what happened? The ship finally limped in. They ended up where? In Yokohama, Japan, didn't they?
That's correct.
Yeah. Yeah. So what was she doing in Yokohama once she got there? I mean, she made it through the typhoon and limped in on the repose and ended up in Yokohama. So what was she doing there?
So she did mention that when they landed in Yokohama, that it was basically completely leveled. There was hardly any building standing. She also said it was very specific about the buildings that they left standing. So it was very carefully planned out.
Yeah.
She did become friendly with a lot of the Japanese civilians, as you mentioned, and they felt so terrible about the war and everything that was happening. We had no warning either about the bombs. So let's see. I have some notes here.
Yeah, that's okay. That's all right. Take your time.
So basically,
I know that the Japanese, you had mentioned that many of the Japanese civilians felt very sorry about the war and what had happened. So I can tell you, I remember when the Japanese formally surrendered, the first time that MacArthur went to Japan to meet with the emperor, as they went through, the Japanese soldiers on the road had their backs turned to the American convoy. And of course, the Americans all thought that was was an insult. And they later found out that the Japanese, to them, that was a sign of respect because they had lost and had to surrender. And they thought they didn't deserve to look at their conquerors in the face, they called it. So the Japanese, yeah, definitely were a very unique people. And finding out that some of them were very remorseful about the war itself in general, it's not something I'm very surprised at all.
Yeah, interesting. So while she was there, this is an interesting story. She and her roommate were shared a room, and they didn't even have a proper toilet. There was a hole dug in the floor with a piece of wood covering it. And their colonel called the army and said, "My girls will not live like this." And within a month, she had a proper toilet installed for the ladies, for the nurses. So that's interesting. Another story about while she was there, she was awakened one morning by a mouse eating her chocolate bar in her room. So unfortunately, they weren't the best of accommodations.
Well, that's a pretty valuable commodity during World War II. Like chocolate and candy like that. Yeah.
Right.
To finding a rat eating, I can imagine her waking up. First of all, well, it's surprising you didn't tell me she freaked out over the rat, not the rat, but the rat eating her chocolate.
Well, I'll be honest, she must have, because I do remember her being very afraid of mice.
Really?
So I'm sure she jumped sky high.
Oh, gosh.
But when walking, she told the story that, my mother was very brave and, and naive as well.
Yeah.
And would walk at night, working the night shift from her dorm room to the hospital. And the first night she arrived, and the soldier on guard said, "How did you get here? You didn't walk here alone, did you?" And she said, "Yes." Well, he had said, like you had mentioned, he said, "You could have been killed by a sniper. You could have been taken and raped by, anybody. So don't you ever walk by yourself again." So from then on, either a soldier had to escort the nurses back and forth, or she walked with her carbine gun over her shoulder, which that was also another picture that was on the original advertisement. My mom and her gun, which I'm very proud of.
Yeah, here we go.
Yeah, there she is.
Yeah, so there's the pictures. Yes.
Yes, thank you, Cece. Yep, top right, there's mom and her gun. I love that. And then the picture in the middle there is my mom with two of her brothers that were also in the army.
Oh, okay.
And the war with her.
Wow.
Yes, and when the nurses, the officers were dining in the dining hall, with fine linens and meals served to them, her brothers were waiting online with their tray for hours trying to get dinner. And that really bothered her. She even tried to fight and, say, "This is not right. Everybody should be treated equal." And, they told her, "Sorry."
Right. Yeah, it don't work that way in the military.
Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah.
So your mom later finished her military career. She got back, but she was awarded the American Campaign Medal, the Asiatic Pacific Campaign Medal, and a World War II Victory Medal while serving in the Nurses Corps. And finally got an honorable discharge from Fort Dix in March of 1996.
1946.
I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you. 1946. Boy, that would have been a long career, wouldn't it? But yeah, 1946. So,
correct.
She had, it was pretty good that, she had given up a part of her own future, a part of her own life to go and serve her country in the Army Nurses Corps. And after serving as a second lieutenant, that's when she married your father, right? Who was also a World War II veteran.
That
And
is
man,
correct. I have a picture here. I don't know if you could see.
okay. Oh yeah, there we go. Okay.
It's my handsome dad.
So she went on to serve as the director of nursing at the #1 nursing home on Long Island. And oh, your parents were married what? 63
63
years?
years. That's correct.
Oh my gosh. And if I'm looking at this correctly, they had 7 children and 60 plus grandchildren.
Yes, and that's grandchildren, great grandchildren, great great grandchildren.
Oh my gosh. I bet they made for a heck of a holiday gathering.
You're not kidding.
You know, I
Christmas
often
was the
joke with
best.
my wife. I joke with my wife the same way because she comes from a very big family and they're all located here close to where we live. And I always joke with her and say, yeah, we can't get together with your family without getting a parade permit from the city. That's how they, so that's kind of sounds like what your family was like. And, you know,
Yeah.
so what was it like, if you would share with us just briefly, what was it like growing up in that house with your mom, you know, after her experiences and all your brothers and sisters and, you know, just kind of briefly share with us, what was that like?
Sure. I could tell you that it was like being in the mini army. So interesting dynamic, my family. So there's 15 years between my oldest sister and I. So they had 4 girls, pretty close, you know, boom, boom, boom. And then they waited 5 years. They had my first brother. 2 years later, my second brother, 2 years later, me. So it
Yeah.
was almost like we were 2 separate families.
Yeah.
We grew up, you know, most of them, the older 4 were married and out of the house by the time I was like 8 years old.
Okay.
So it was an interesting dynamic.
Yeah.
Thank God we're all super close, and most everybody came over on Sundays for the big Italian pasta Sunday
Yeah.
dinner. So, you know, we did see each other a lot. So it was great. We're still very, very close to this day. My mom, I can tell you, when I was in high school, I'm still not a morning person, never was. So I'd be sleeping and it would be like 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning after being out dancing late at night with my friends. She would fling my door open, clap her hands, get up, there's work to be done. Like that was my mother. And
Yeah.
she and I would clean that big old house from top to bottom. And I was not allowed out until everything was sparkling.
But you know what? It sounds like you have so many fond memories of your mom and so much love and respect for her. And I have to tell you, I mean, you know, we want to share that respect too, as her being an Army nurse in World War II and the decision she made to volunteer to go help wounded Marines and wounded soldiers and even Japanese civilians, you know, who were in need of help. And, you know, we definitely want to recognize that. And GraceAnn, I am so thankful that you were able to come on and share this information with us. And before we close, though, I want to ask you one question. If you could share one thought with our audience, what would it be? What would you share with them?
Gosh.
Thinking hard, right?
Yeah, a lot of things I could share. I guess I'll just say, you know, my mom was an amazing role model for everyone in my family. She was the epitome of strength and bravery, you know, professionally and personally. She was a great role model. I do truly wish that I could be a quarter of the woman that my mother was. She was truly amazing.
Yeah.
And I just, I want to say thank you to all for joining and for having me on, Paul, to share my mom's legacy. Um, you know, family is so important, and family and love and that's what life's about. So everybody just keep being great.
Well, especially thank you for that thought, especially in the military community. Those families are so important for those military service members serving wherever they're serving, even if it's in the United States. Those families become very important. So that's a very good thought, GraceAnn, and I appreciate that. And for those of you joining us tonight, again, I want to thank you for taking the time to spend with us. And as you know, when we close the show, oh, there's a nice hug from Jeanette there for you. We want to take a moment to share with you the VFW actually has, there it is. Thank you, CC. The VFW National Convention in Louisville, Kentucky is coming up July 27th through August 1st. So for those of you that might be interested in either how you can support it, even if you can't be there, there's an information piece on YouTube you can watch that goes in detail. It tells you what's going on, even tells you what they're going to be doing and how you can lend your support, even if you can't attend. So I encourage you. The VFW's definitely had their hand in helping a lot of veterans, myself included. So I want to thank them as well. So if you get a chance, take a look, see if there's something there. If you're around the area, see if you'd like to go check out what they're doing and learn more about the VFW. So thank you so much tonight for everyone joining us. We really appreciate it. And there's a hug from Nancy and Carol. Oh, they're all coming up now, right? There we go. We thank you, Gina. We thank you so much, all of you, for joining the show. And GraceAnn, I thank you for coming on. Don't forget, those of you who've been watching the WGSN-DB Going Solo Veterans Corner, part of Going Solo Media Network, we hope to see you on our next show.
Thank you so much, Paul. Thanks all.